have stories. Every single one of us. From the highest of the high to the lowest of the low, we all have stories. Exploring the world for the greatest stories of all time.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Aron O'Dowd Show.
The Aron O'Dowd Show. Our soul is the screen upon which we project our dreams. What's your story?
Hello and welcome on today's episode. We have another amazing guest as always. The finance world is something we all delve in, from money management to our own personal and business money to investing and understanding. Mike Deacon has spent a lot of time and is an expert in this field in different areas. Hello, welcome to the show, Mike. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thanks, Aaron, and thank you for having me on your podcast today. I hope that we can have an engaging discussion and people get some value out of it.
Tell us about how you got into the world you play in, Mike.
How did I get into the world of finance? That's a very good question. By family bereavement. Shall I explain more?
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
That's not the answer most people expect you to say, but
No.
my journey was very strange. I was at university doing my degree quite happily, and I was about to take some exams, and I got a phone call. I had to leave the exam room, and my father had been taken seriously ill. He was the only breadwinner in the house. No money coming in. He was seriously ill. He almost died, and someone had to go and pay the bills. So literally, I left university, didn't finish my degree, came straight home, went and found a job in the city working in financial services because that's what I wanted to do. It just meant I started earlier than I planned through circumstances outside my control. Within 6 months, my father recovered. We moved house. We moved in a blizzard. My mother did most of the work, so my father was still recovering from he had a major heart attack, and he was really laid up. And my mum then got seriously ill, and she died 3 weeks after we moved. As I learned much later on in life, that she actually had sepsis, and it completely shut her down. And my father wasn't aware of it. He didn't really do enough to basically get mum to hospital quickly enough, and she passed. So there you go. That's how I got to financial services.
How does that impact you as an individual?
Makes you realise how precious life is and that you want to make the most of it. So for me as an individual, it just made me determined to, be as successful as I could possibly be the best person I could be in that space. I was very fortunate. I was going out with my then girlfriend, who's now my wife, and has basically stayed by me. Well, we've been together nearly 50 years now, both married and together before we got married.
Wow. And did the world of finance, did you become like, I want to be in that, or was it just something that kind of popped up in your atmosphere?
No, it was something I wanted to do, but I didn't know where I wanted to be. So I sort of went into the city. I was very fortunate. It was a time where you could get a job in the city literally at a drop of a hat if you had enough qualifications to get you through, which I did. And I started at the bottom and worked my way through. I ended up sort of working for some major banks, running some finance companies. So I started from the bottom and worked up. And I was fortunate. I worked hard and I made some career moves at the right time. I worked on some fantastically interesting projects during my time. Running businesses was a whole new ball game. We'll talk about that later, maybe.
Definitely. I do remember hearing a story that you were the paper boy. Tell us about that.
Oh my gosh, that's an interesting reminder. Yeah, my first job was when I was about 13 years old. I thought about doing a milk round back in the days when milkmen delivered milk in milk floats. Right? If you remember the floats, they had glass bottles. Recycling was a thing long before recycling became a thing. But anyway, I chose not to do that, and I did an early morning paper round at the age of 13, when you can work legally still at 13. Shows my age. So I did that. I worked for a motor factor for 4 years while I was studying. Then I worked in a warehouse for a year and quintupled my money, which was great because it meant that I could actually have some downtime, and pay for it out of my own pocket with my then girlfriend, now my wife. So yeah, it wasn't all bad, but life was quite tough at home. My parents didn't have too much, in the way of income, and I was able to basically plug a gap when we needed it.
Was that what kind of gave you the hard work environment and skills you have today?
Yeah, you have to basically deal with the problems you've got in front of you. And people, there's a lot of think speak in life today, a lot of opinions. But when it comes down to brute fact, when you got to do something, you got to do it. However difficult that might be, you've got to find a solution. Sometimes that means taking risk, and sometimes that means taking an initiative. You've just got to go and do it. There's no substitute. No one's there to help you. You have to do it yourself. You build your networks over time, but when you were like me, in an academic world 1 minute and the next minute working to basically pay the bills, life changes.
And how did you adapt to the academic to working and paying your bills?
I had to learn very quickly, and I had to learn that instead of being someone who was, able to sort of converse at people at a certain level, it was like snakes and ladders. I just hit a big snake and went right back to the bottom, and I had to start all over again in a different space and work my way up the ladders.
And what is that like to go from the bottom up and then go at again the same process?
That's a good question. Um, when you slide down to the bottom, you have to be humble, and you have to realize that where you were before doesn't necessarily automatically give you a free pass to the next stage in your life. You have to earn it, and I had to earn my spurs, so I did. And I gradually worked my way through. I worked for several institutions over a sort of 10-15 year period, building up my knowledge, moving on, because you could in those days. You could be quite flexible. You could have a job for a couple of years and then you could move on to the next job. And each move was a step up a ladder, one at a time. You just did that. That's how I managed to get such a broad experience with such a wide range of different people. I was very lucky. But you have to make your luck. So that's how I did it.
Do you think luck is earned or luck is luck?
Mostly earned, occasionally given. I think that's a fair thing to say. Sometimes things land in your lap when you least expect it, least plan for it, but you have to grab it. If you miss the opportunity, when it's gone, it's gone. Sometimes luck is not always good. Sometimes you make a bad decision, and then you've got to live with the consequences of that. That's life. Doesn't mean to say it's easy, but life is like a game of snakes and ladders. It really is. You go up and down, up and down.
And when you're climbing up the ladder, do you know what the risks are to make or to take or to decide on?
Yeah, you have to do your own personal risk assessment. That sounds very professional and very, I don't know, very taught, but it's not. It's intuitive. You have to make a personal set of risk decisions as to whether it's the right job for you, if it's the right fit for you. Can you thrive in a new environment? Are you adaptable? There's a whole bunch of things you have to weigh up. And of course, you've got not just your professional way up, you've got your personal way up. So, will my wife and my family be happy? Because changes happen right the way through my life, before I got married, after I got married, and they all interlink. So life is a series of complex decisions that has a very direct vertical, which is birth to death. And you only think about the death stuff as you get older, but you don't think of it in a maudlin way. You think of it as the end of a good long journey.
Mike, you seem very philosophical. Is that years of wisdom or years of school of hard knocks?
That's a leading question. I like that one. It's both. You're philanthropic because as you get older, you made some dumb mistakes. You try to make them only once. You know, it's the only advice I would ever give to anybody. Don't repeat the same mistake. If you make it once, even if it's a totally glorious mistake, make it once. Don't repeat it because it's much more painful the second time. So yeah, you learn as you go along, and the philanthropic and I suppose reflective view that you have of life is because you've made the mistakes and you know what to avoid and when not to avoid, and you become more pragmatic. You also don't worry about things that are trivial, which you may be used to when you were still climbing those ladders.
And someone that spent, your whole lifetime in finance, is it your bread and butter that makes you inspired and rub the hands and say, oh, here comes the challenge. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I do like. I seem to have people gravitate to me that are, how can I put it, needing help more than most. If it's vanilla and straightforward, there's ten a penny of people that can do that. I tend to get the waifs and strays of life. So the waifs and strays of life are those who basically need help, which is really there, but you've got to dig hard for it, work hard for it, and make sure it comes together. So that's what I tend to do wherever I possibly can. Forgive the noise. That's my smart meter deciding to have a moment. So there you go. Technology at its greatest.
And when we think of finance, we think of investments, we think of stocks, we think of assets, we think of all these things, but it seems very complex. But someone who spent, the lifetime you have, is it easier than what we expect?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I'm a commercial finance broker now, so I arrange funding for businesses big and small. Investment is a dark art in its own right. You have to make an educated guess on the basis of the business that you're investing in. What sector is it in? Is it robust? Is it heavily competitive? Is there room for expansion? Can investors get a return on the money they put in because they're putting in what's called hurt money? That's real money that's going to go in. It goes in once and stays there. So there's an art to that. So investing is different to lending. Lending has a beginning, a middle, and an end, like a book. Investment is a marriage for life, and divorce is painful. Right? I'm trying to simplify the analogies to make it easier for those who are not in the finance industry to understand it. So investment is as much emotionally intuitive as well as being knowledgeable and well researched. Some people take a punt. You think how many entrepreneurs have failed to get investment, right? And I'll cite one simple example in the UK. There was a young entrepreneur who had an idea for children's mini suitcases many years ago. They appeared on the UK Dragon's Den, or the equivalent in the US as Shark Tank. He couldn't get any money. His business went through a difficult phase, but he actually grounded out, found investors himself. He didn't get any money from the Dragons, and now he has a very, very solid global business where you see young children putting small little carry-ons. And luckily, the travel market and the holiday market really has focused on sort of cutting weight down to reduce fuel consumption when you're traveling everywhere. So now small and light and beautiful are the order of the day. So he made a value judgment and was successful. So I think the answer is that investment is very much done based on historic research, but you're gambling on the future. Same applies to commercial finance, but it's much more structured because you're basing it on a business that's traded, what its opportunities are, how they're going to scale up, how they're going to grow, is there a demand, and that applies to all businesses, big and very small. It's always about when's the next dollar coming in, when's the next payment coming in, how are you going to make your money, and you're basing it on trends. So you're doing a lot of trend analysis, both for investments and for lending. Okay. I'll say this: lenders, there are high risk lenders that charge high rates, and then there are these systemic and traditional banks and larger non-bank financial institutions You offer cheaper money, not as cheap as personal money. I'll talk about that in a minute. Purely on the basis that they're a sound bet. So they like to lend to easy, comfortable, solid businesses, i.e. low risk lending. Smaller businesses and entrepreneurs really struggle to get money. There are places you can get them, but you inevitably have to pay higher rates or borrow personally and or borrow from the bank of your parents, family. Because that's the way that a lot of small and entrepreneurial businesses start their life. It's that friends and family help. Because the mainstreams don't do it so much as they used to. The banks used to be very much more parochial, local, personable. You go in, you can organise funding at the drop of a hat. Those days went out 40 years ago with the advent of digitalisation, technology, access to data. And suddenly everyone was checking everything in granular detail. And that requires, a totally different mindset.
And someone has spent, 40 years and you've seen the ups and downs, the crashes, and if you were starting again tomorrow, what would you do differently?
3 things I would do differently. Number 1, do your research first. Make sure it's a market that you feel you can actually make money in and that you have the skill sets to actually deliver. Okay, so make sure you're competent and your market is robust enough to last longer than just a few years. That's the first thing you do. Do your research to make sure that you research that your competency is capable and that there is a market there for your products, whether it's a new business or growing an existing business. Do the research. The second thing is make sure that you've got a good team of people around you and that all of your financial information is up to date. Because if you don't know how your business works, you're not going to be a very good candidate to borrow money or to be investable by somebody who wants to invest. Okay, so make sure you know where your business is every single day. And I always say to businesses, make sure you keep 3 to 6 months' money tucked away for a rainy day, because rainy days do come. Okay. And the third thing that I would say to anyone looking to raise finance or investment is plan. And that's plan 3, maybe 3 to 4 years ahead for a more mature business. If you're a new business, plan for the first couple of years carefully. Make sure that you're not trying to grow too quickly or you're running before you can walk. Make sure that you understand your market, who your competitors are. Make sure that you feel you've got a space you can operate in. And above all, this might sound very, very obvious, make sure you pay all your bills personally every single month. Don't miss a payment. In today's technologically based world, now lenders can access all your information in real time online. Your credit scores are there to be looked at both corporately and personally. Make sure personally you have no arrears, no debts, nothing. If you've dissolved a company or you've been involved in an insolvency, that puts you at a big disadvantage in the UK, certainly. It's not a conducive society to basically lending to someone who's really had a failed business. That really does hurt you. If you miss payments on your credit cards or miss payments on your mortgage, that's bad as well. So make sure that you are personally solvent as well as business solvent. Now that's a hard thing to do when you basically leave a job and set your own business up. You've got to make sure that you've got enough money and your idea has been tested and researched so that you can go and do what you want to do, be successful at it. That's hard. And not everyone succeeds. So that's just, 47 years of experience that I can share with people that, just do the simple things. And the other thing actually that you're going to need, and this is not a financial thing, make sure you've got the support of your friends and family. Because if things don't work out for you, you've got to make sure that your back's covered. And the only people that cover your back are those that are closest to you and care for you. All right? So make sure your friends and family are absolutely 100% behind you, both emotionally and financially. I really do stress that. Because if you can't do the journey, you might be good at doing the business, but it might put your family and your friends at risk, and vice versa. So be careful. Think it through, and then if you're ready and you've got full support, do it.
You spent a long time in the banking world and you left it. Tell us about how that transition went from the corporate world to now what you do.
Yeah, yeah. My journey is very interesting. I've spent probably 10 years in corporate and international banking, did a lot of big projects. So I worked on some big infrastructure projects. I ran some international funding departments. I then worked for two fully listed businesses, one doing the underwriting for a fully listed UK company, and then another for a subsidiary, a leasing subsidiary of a manufacturing business. So I was at the sharp end of doing running a business, running people, managing strategies, doing business plans, planning for growth, making sure that the bad debt ratio was under 1%. So yeah, it's and then managing people who wanted pay rises for doing the work. So you've got a lot going on when you're running a business, and you've got to make sure everyone's happy. So you're a plate spinner. So you're spinning maybe 24 plates all at the same time, and you've got to keep them all spinning. Don't let them drop. So that's what you do when you run a business. You've got to be multitasker. You've got to be empathetic. You've also got to be strategic. Sometimes you have to be a bit brutal with discipline. You've got all those things going on, and at the same time, you then go home. Then you've got your family to worry about. That's another set of disciplines, very different, emotional. So yes, and it's the same for every business entrepreneur in whatever industry you're in. You're always plate spinning. Everyone's plate spinning. And the best way I can say to people that they can help themselves best is to be well prepared, well researched, make sure that you're on top of everything you can, because that makes it easier for you to have less of a problem maybe when you're looking for money to expand or grow your business, or to buy another business, for example. I do that too. I help businesses buy out their own businesses or buy other people's businesses.
Wow. And when you were let go, how did you transition of like I'm doing all this, now I've got nothing to do and I need to go look for something else to keep the itch and the drive going?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that happened to me. That happened to me. I got made redundant twice. Once I found another job very quickly, and I actually moved up the ladder, so that was really good for me. I was very fortunate, and the job actually propelled me to a much bigger and more interesting career. So I was very pleased with that. But the second time it happened, I was on holiday, and said to my wife the day before we came home, I said, I think I'm going to be invited to turn around and go back home when I go back to the office. I don't know why. It's a sixth sense. I can't put my finger on it. I didn't have any inkling. I just think that it might happen. And I explained why. I'd actually bought a business a couple of years ago for the employer I worked for. And it was exactly the right business fit. And I told them to keep the staff because they were very competent, very good. And my employers took that at their word and did. And they said, well, we like this business so much, we've got no need for yours now because we're going to merge it all in the one business that you helped us buy. So thanks a lot. Here's a handshake, turn around, off you go. So what I thought would happen, happened. It's funny, isn't it? It's instinctive. When you know something's going to happen and it happens, you go away, you feel a bit numb, you have a lot of emotions running through when you get made redundant. Anyone who's been made redundant will resonate with the story. You feel all those six senses. You go through that sort of anger, rejection, anger, fear, hurt, all those sorts of things. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, it comes down to the fact that at the time in your career, when it happens to you, it's just that you're in the wrong place at the wrong time in the wrong way. There's nothing you can do about it. It's in the eyes of others. So the question is, how do I pivot and go on and move on? So I basically spent 6 months thinking about it. I couldn't re-enter the market because my contract wouldn't allow me to. So I pivoted, became a consultant, and did work in public health because my wife had and been made redundant myself, got another job with a major university, and then worked with a whole bunch of public health professionals that have all been laid off. They'd all been made redundant, but they all coalesced to set up a public health consultancy, and they were doing a lot of work. They had no commercial experience, so I was in the right place at the right time, completely unintended. So I spent the first 4 or 5 years of my business as I work on my own, doing public health projects and doing business consulting and helping local authorities and other organisations to spin out and privatise or go into community interest companies or B Corps. So because of my commercial training skills and my commercial experience, I was able to do that. And I had the context because I built them up over a long period of time to be able to find people to help me to consult actively for the new business. But I still wanted to do commercial finance, and I never left that space. So I still did work after my year of, I couldn't run a finance company, so I spent a year absolutely just doing the public health stuff. But I eventually came back into the marketplace when I could, and I rebuilt my business in commercial finance as a commercial finance broker, and here I am today.
What really has that inspiration and drive to be in commercial finance for you?
Helping people, Aaron. It's really simple, right? Think of the analogy that this is the oxymoron of finance, certainly in the UK, and I suspect it is in most Western countries. You can actually borrow money more cheaply as a person than you can as a business. But in order for you to borrow the money cheaply as a person, you have to have a job, because that's a circular economy. Okay? So businesses pay more for their money generally than people pay to borrow money than people who are individuals, generally speaking, if they have a good credit rating. So they pay their bills every month. So with that oxymoron firmly in mind, I want to help businesses create value for themselves, for their customers, and most importantly, for the owners and their staff, because you're creating a what I would call a dignity vertical. If you look after everyone in that chain from top to bottom, then everyone benefits. Customers benefit from the products and services a business gives. They're making money, their customers are making money. So this is where the circular economy thing comes in. Okay. So if you're making money for a business and you're providing the services to other customers who are happy to pay your value, okay, then you can run successfully. The owners benefit, the staff benefit because they're getting paid. They in turn have families and dependents, so they can then pay their bills. And that creates value because that money is then recycled into the economy and spent. It's spent elsewhere. So that circularity, keeping people engaged, busy, working, respectful, it gives them purpose. Helping a business provides that help. And 40 years ago, you may not remember this because you're too young for that. Very nice. You're too young for that.
Yeah.
40 years ago, people could go to their bank, they could talk to a real person and say, I need help. Okay. And that person would deal with you in person, locally, where you work. That's how it worked. But the banks and the non-bank institutions decided that they didn't want staff because they were costing money and they weren't making enough profit. So they sacrificed staff and let them go. Many of them who were well trained, experienced, they worked through the system, became brokers, but they'd been trained by the lenders themselves. So they knew how the system worked. Move on 40 years, people like me are genuine financial dinosaurs. We're the last of a generation that were actually educated and schooled in the way that commercial finance works. Anyone under the age of 40 won't have had that experience. And what our job is, I'm a non-exec director of my National Association of Commercial Finance Brokers. Our job is to try and help train new brokers who've become members of our association to actually learn how to do their job even better than they're already doing. they didn't have the benefit of the learning that we had. So if you like, the gamekeeper turned the poacher. That's how I look at myself. But a lot of youngsters I call youngsters anyone under the age of 40, they won't have had that background. So for them, their job's much harder. They have to do the same work, but without the benefit of knowing how the system works. So if you like, we have to be the translator between the customer who's basically borrowing, and you have to speak in normal English to them. And then you've got the lenders on the other side who speak a business English and a lender English, which is different. It's the same language, but it's a different taxonomy of words and of meaning, what it all means and all the jargon. So we have to try and simplify it so that the customer understands what they're getting, they know what they're going to pay, it's good for their business, and they then either decide to accept or reject an offer that we can actually elicit from. That's the whole ethos of what I do now. I'm an informed financial postman stroke advisor. And I use that phrase very deliberately because people come to you and say, can you give me money? And I have to ask them a load of questions as I'm the lender, but I'm not the lender. I'm a friendly face that can actually help them navigate that so that when the time comes, they're ready and prepared. Then if they get the money, they're happy. And that's how I get paid.
How does that feel like to be the translator for people?
I equate my job using an analogy like kissing frogs, right? For every 100, every 100 people I meet, 97 are frogs. They don't taste nice, and I don't close business with them. But I close 3% because they're ready, willing, able, receptive, and have got all the information, and I've found the right partners for them. I have a lot of people that come to me that have dreamy aspirations or they're unrealistic expectations. And some, unfortunately, through no fault of their own, have made mistakes which are still hurting them now. They've had financial failures, or they've not been paying their bills because they've been trying to rob people to pay Paul. They've waited too long to ask for the money instead of being prepared and ready and researched, ready to go. Which is why I keep going back to the fact that if you want money, plan well ahead. Do your research and plan it, and make sure that your business is robust enough to borrow when you can, rather than waiting until it's too late. And so many businesses do the latter. So that's basically a very simple synopsis of what I see on a regular daily basis. And you do become quite phlegmatic about it. You do realize that you want to try and help people. And I help people now for the reasons I've just mentioned, because you're making sure that those who depend on someone's business and someone's job relies on that business thriving, they're looked after. It's all about people. If you're providing a product or a service that somebody wants, you've got to make sure that you're resilient. That resilience is shared and circulated in the economy.
Mike, are you afraid that you're a dying dinosaur of the old way of doing it and seeing the new way in the gaps?
No, I'm not afraid of it. You have to embrace change. You have to learn new skills. So as an analog-based broker, I'm having to learn digital and more up-to-date skills. And you've got to keep doing that. You have to keep learning. So you adapt to survive. And lenders I work with now have different ways of doing their business. And a lot of it now is actually interactive, direct, with access to online banking, online accounting, all those sorts of things. So people can interrogate a business without potentially the need of a broker. But the reason the broker is valuable is because they can actually be independent, they can actually see both sides, and they can actually help you to get the deal that you need across the line. So you can actually talk to the customer, explain what's happening, tell them what they need to do to get in order for them to get the money, and give them advice, which is what I'm regulated by the FCA. I'm regulated to give debt advice. So that's what I do. I help people to do that.
And what is the dream that Mike is here to do in this world?
For me, my dream is to make sure that I've helped as many people as I possibly can. I'm not I've got no grandeur views about what I leave as a legacy. The legacy, I suppose, I want to leave is that people have been helped in some small way by something that I've actually helped them to do their business better, to create value, to create sort of a proper sort of sustainable chain of our, I suppose, our economy and our lifestyles. Without people helping one another, what is there left? And people tend to forget that. Even in business where you're trying to make a profit, you're still helping somebody. You're doing it at a profit, of course you are. It's not philanthropy. It's not charity, right? It's actually, generating wealth and helping people to actually be better versions of themselves, both ethically as well as financially. So there is a balance. People think that money is a dirty, filthy lucre word. It isn't. It's a tool to enable you to do things that you want to do better.
It is a tool, and we all have levels of education, but I think a higher percentage just thinks it in, out, pay the mortgage, pay the bills, and that's it,
Yeah. But it's how you generate that wealth to do exactly what you just said. And that's the thing that, I see day in, day out. I see businesses that can really do with some help, and they're hamstrung because they've made a mistake in the past. Through no fault of their own sometimes, by the way. And you really want to help them. But sometimes the system won't allow you to do it because lenders, I think, over the last 20 years especially, have become far more risk averse because they've built up this additional knowledge base they've got access to. So now, if you think about it, if you're applying for personal or business finance, everyone talks to each other. So the lenders all have data. They all use credit reference agencies. They all have intelligence agencies with things like sort of HPI for making sure that assets belong to the right person, or Cyphers, which is for the insurance checks to make sure that people haven't defaulted or are serial claimers. All this information is out there in the virtual world, and people can access it. So you're more visible, even if you think you're invisible. You're more visible now in terms of your lifestyle, from using your phone to anything that you do, any transaction you do online, because we're such a connected, interactive world. Everyone knows everything about you. So you've got to make sure that you run your life as simply and as straightforwardly as you possibly can. It's not always possible, but that will make it easier for you to raise money.
Is there something you wish could change in the industry you've grown up and be wise in?
Yeah, there is one thing I would change. Make it more human. And I say that because in a world increasingly where younger generation are just addicted to their phones and they're talking to their phones, the art of human conversation is still vital and will never change. So for me, I just hope that finance doesn't become too automated, because it will eventually fail, because humanity wants that personal interactive touch. They do. People deal with people, and the worry for me has been how people have been moved out of the equation, and a lot of decision making for finance, whether it's personal or business, is becoming more and more automated. It's designed to save cost, but the truth of the matter is that unfortunately the computer isn't always right. You need to understand the softer skills, the personal circumstances, the overarching reasons why people are in the position they are. And I still work with lenders who have a more analog or a semi-analog, semi-digital approach, where they use the tools that technology enables them to make a decision, but they actually have a human touch in making the decision. So I think that in itself is valuable, and I think that blended approach is a much better approach. So from my perspective, I just wish that there's much more human interaction brought back into finance over time, because people are going to need that. You think if you get yourself into debt, right, you need counselling, and people like me try and prevent that by making sure businesses are robust and actually could sustain themselves by having the money to actually grow their business or keep their business on an even keel. And that personal human touch is really valuable. So that's my wish, is that we don't go down the robotic road and have a 1984 doomsday scenario in 50 or 100 years' time. That's my worry. By that time, I'll be dust anyway. So it's my children and their children's future that I'm worried about, not so much me.
Human interaction is something that we all need, and probably in the world that you play in, Mike, and love playing in, it's so vital, from doing deal to deal, getting to know them, understanding, and then be able to prescribe or design a way where they can get their dream to happen.
Yeah, and everyone has a dream, You don't want to quell the human spirit of actually having a dream, okay? That applies in whatever a line of work or activity you undertake. Everyone has a dream to aspire to be the best person that they can be, and they can achieve the best outcome that they can achieve. We're all striving to do that. Some maybe are a bit more sort of selfish about it, and I understand that, not in a bad way, but they're very self-motivated. And you'll understand this as a sportsman. Sports people are particularly focused on being the very best they can be and to optimize their skills, okay? And sometimes that's to the mutual exclusion of everything else, personal and all the social bits around you, because you're driven, okay? And people are like that in business, but people still need support. It doesn't matter how driven you are, you can't do it alone. You may think you can, but you can't. And I've found that the work that I do, if you have a bit of empathy, people open up and they tell you things that maybe they really don't want to tell you, but actually are really important to help understand how you can solve their problems for them. So I do believe that you do need that human touch, even in finance, even though it's a big world, lots of investment money going, people making money for the sake of money and just accumulating wealth. But do you know what? When you're dead, see ya. Money's gone, your health's gone, you're gone. It's absolutely futile. But if you leave a good legacy for the next generation and generations to come, that you've done the right thing and laid good foundations, and that you can pass the baton on to people who actually have the same values as you, it's good. So that's what I, try and strive to do and help businesses to achieve, is that they can be successful, they can make their money, and they pass legacies both to their staff and to the people that inherit the keys to their business, and to the customers they serve.
The environment that you play in, Mike, is quite stressful, I'd say. How do you manage that stress being in that environment?
Yeah, it's stressful. In my line of work, I eat what I kill. So I get paid largely by results. Sometimes I take a small advisory fee to help people where they've got a particularly difficult problem. But the vast majority of my work is fairly transactional. So I have to make sure I find people that I can help, and they get what they want, and I can be paid for my time and my services. I'm no different to an accountant or a lawyer or any tradesperson. I've got to get paid for my services. So you'd be amazed how many people basically waste your time and ask for a lot of advice, and they give you nothing for it. And yet they're the ones who want it maybe cheaper rates than others. I get very, as soon as someone says, "What's the rate?" I go, "Well, are you credit worthy?" And therein starts a conversation. It's either a very short conversation, which is, "Well, of course I am." So, "Well, you haven't shown me anything that proves it to me. So if you can't, I can't help you. Have a lovely day. Good luck." But if someone is prepared to actually go through that process, they get what they want. So for me, I'm doing a lot of vetting. And I say no. I say no to a lot of people because I know what the lenders will think when I actually look at the proposition. Sometimes I'll take a difficult case on, and I'll get it through, because I know a way that I can solve the problem, even if the client's feeling pain and squealing a bit, because sometimes they do. But I said, well, if you want the money and you need it for your business expansion, and you're already growing your business, then these are the rules. you either take it or leave it. I can't help you. If you don't say yes, then I wish you luck and move on.
And I presume we get a lot of people coming into saying, hey, Mike, I got this project and that project and so on. How do you manage that?
Very easy. I get that a lot with sort of investment or large debt propositions, which is, have you thought it through? Have you got any hurt money? Have you got any experience? Do you know what the market's like? Have you got a team of people? That's just the starting part of the conversation. People who want to buy distressed businesses or they want to do management buyouts or management buy-ins, I've got to make sure that they know their industry, they know what they're about, they're financially savvy, and they've got experience. If they don't pass those tests, I'm going to say, look, you can't do it. I also get a lot of investment proposals where people got a great idea and they think, oh, I'll speak to Mike. He can raise me £5 or £10 million straight away. Well, no. Have you tested it? No. Have you done a 3-year plan? No. Have you got customers ready? No. Well, that's an idea then, isn't it? Well, no, I can make it work. I said, no, it's an idea. You have to demonstrate all these things before any serious lender will credibly take you on board and actually consider helping. If you don't pass that test, it's just an idea. And there are so many people I've met who have great ideas, but they really don't know how to execute and aren't prepared to put in painful money of their own. They're not prepared to bootstrap it. Some I'm working with currently have actually raised a lot of money and they need more. And they've got it absolutely nailed on. They can prove their business concept, it's working, they're trading, they're actually selling products, but they need X to get them to the next level. I mean, I'll give you an example of one that's actually in the banking sector. There's a bank founded by an American couple called Metro Bank, which is big in the UK, and they have grown on the basis that they've kept asking their investors to put more and more money into the bank as equity, because they have to carry 8% of what they call tier 1 capital to make them effectively solvent and compliant under UK banking rules. And they rely on depositors' money, which they then re-lend out. So they're basically using customer money, plus they borrow money from institutional investors to actually lend out to other people at a rate higher than what they're borrowing at. That's how banks work. All banks work, but this particular bank has found it really hard to make profits for many, many years. So it kept relying on their infusions of more cash and more capital. Okay. So don't think that banks are money pits. They don't. They rely on the businesses that they lend to. They're the most exposed sector of all in many respects, because if a business fails, the bank fails. And it has happened. You've seen Royal Bank of Scotland made some wrong decisions, almost went bust. The government bailed them out with about 5 hours to spare back in 2008. They were in deep trouble. Northern Rock, another one, went to the wall. Banks are not infallible. They take risk too. Their risk is that their customers actually do their job properly. This is why I do feel that at times that some of the lenders who've been gone through pain, especially the ones bailed out by the government back in 2008, are a lot more risk averse now than they used to be. So that gap is being filled further down the food chain by private lenders, non-bank financial institutions, and they're charging a higher rate because they themselves are borrowing money from what they call wholesale lenders, who are probably banks and investment funds who are lending it to them at X, and then the bank or the borrowing company, the non-bank lender, is lending it out at 2X or 3X. They're taking the risk. So you're seeing a lot more of that now than you ever used to 25, 30 years ago, much more.
What is your explanation of risk for Mike when he's looking at something or he's thinking about something to jump 2 feet into?
Is that personal or business?
Both.
Okay. Personal for me is it worth my while doing it, actually? Is it something that will give me satisfaction and will give those that I'm asked to help satisfaction? That could be, a family matter. It could be seeing friends. It could be doing anything that, could help somebody else, giving my time to somebody. But as long as I feel that that's going to help somebody along the way, then that ticks a box for me. From a business perspective, the word no is very important, because you have to actually say no a lot to make sure that the things you want to say yes to, you've got the time to actually help. Because time is your biggest enemy, because you don't have enough of it. And from a personal perspective, your health has got to be important. So you've got to look after yourself. And that means everything in moderation, whether it's food, exercise, your activities, your personal likes and dislikes. Just make sure it's balanced, that's all. You can indulge occasionally, that's fine, it's perfectly acceptable. But make sure you keep your life in balance, your health and your wealth in balance. That's what you can do. But for businesses, it's saying no a lot, making sure that if something I don't believe is realistic enough, or I think has a problem, or they've not, and often I get half a story. The number of times I've had to say no after I've actually had to do a bit of digging and get the full story out from people who apply for money or apply for my help to get them funding. They haven't told me the whole story, possibly because they don't want to, because they know that there are a few skeletons in the cupboard. But I find them, and then I say, well, why didn't you tell me about this? I usually find them when a lender says, did you know about this? I can't research everything. Sometimes I miss things, and the lenders do their research too. So I work with lenders. Some of them I know personally. I've worked with them. A lot of the private lenders I work with, I've known for years, and they're really good because they give you an honest, quick answer. So, yeah, the word no is important for me because it fleshes out a lot of time wasters or people that are just not going to meet the criteria that they expect. And I go back to, well, what's the rate? I will always say, well, what's your creditworthiness like? What's your story? Show me everything. And some people, even when you ask them multiple times, when you know there's a good story there, getting information is like getting blood out of a stone on time from time to time for whatever reason. Sometimes they're too busy doing the day job to actually give you the stuff that they need to make their day job easier, so they're actually kicking themselves, or they're hiding something which they don't want you to know about, which eventually comes out because lenders do their work and research. I know because I was that side of the track. I know how they will dig. They will dig. So my job is to prevent people from actually falling foul of making approaches to too many lenders and they get the same answer and then they wonder why. And then they come to me and expect me to be a miracle worker. Well, I can do that with some people, but I say, if I can do it, I'll find somebody you haven't found, but there will be a cost and you're going to have to decide whether to pay it or not. And therein lies a very simple synopsis of my daily life.
What would be the advice you give to your younger self?
Be patient. I wasn't patient when I was younger because I wanted to climb up those ladders. Going back to the snakes and ladders analogy, I wanted to climb up a ladder. If I'd fallen down a snake, I wanted to get back up there as quickly as I could. Sometimes impatience would get the better of me. But as I've got older, I've worked out that actually being more thoughtful, not acting impulsively, not doing something immediately, going away, thinking about it, and going revisiting it often proves to be the wisest course, because you then eliminate the mistakes that you could make and you then come to an informed decision more quickly. Which means, going back to the word no, you can say no and understand why and explain it. Sometimes I would rush headlong into something when I was younger and I would pay a price later where it didn't work out. And you learn that patience. I wish I could say that if you're a patient person naturally at a young age, you're blessed. Most people don't learn that. I'm guilty. So for me, I've learned the art of just being more considered.
If people want to find out where they can get to know more and see all the amazing work you do, Mike, where can they go?
Very simply, you can follow me on my LinkedIn page. I have a company page for my business, which is Asset Based Finance and Leasing Limited. So I have an ABFL page on LinkedIn. And you can watch my personal profile on LinkedIn for the posts I make. And my personal posts, more often than not, are not always about finance. They're about the wider world and some of my own sort of personal thoughts about things, and maybe about the odd book too. So yeah, that's what I do. I'm finding as I get older, I want to actually educate people by sharing my knowledge with them, because actually the gift of knowledge is actually the ability to actually share it, because you're not afraid to share it. Anyone could do what I do, but I just want to help people to avoid some of the bear traps, certainly when it comes to finding money for their business, by teaching them what they should and shouldn't do. What they can then do is come to me and say, can you find me a lender that can help me? And that's my skill, because I have a knowledge base of lenders that goes back 47 years. So I know a lot of people. That's my value. But I want to help people understand what they're actually letting themselves in for. So by educating them, it's a good way of me to be able to hopefully pick up one or two clients that come to me and say, I've read all your stuff. Thank you. Can you help me? Because they're already ready to be, they're already warm and they're open and they're willing to be helped. So giving something back is education. So that's what I will continue to do as long as I continue to do this.
Mike, it's been a blast and enjoyment, and thank you so much, man.
Well, thank you, Aron, for A, listening, and B, for some very simple but insightful questions. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Aron O'Dowd Show, where the world's best stories are told. If you like, please post a review or subscribe to the show. To find out more, contact us at aronodowd.com. That's ARONODOWD.com. We're always ready to share another magnificent tale from the world's best storytellers. So stay tuned and rock on.